Wow. First of all, congratulations to you all having such a strong voice. That was awesome, to be honest. I was back there and thinking, okay, from now on, whenever I hear the song, I'm going to think of this moment. So that was pretty good. When I was just backstage, I was reflecting something. In 2013, I became a TV presenter. And the interesting thing is I have tremendous stage anxiety, but I'd never told anyone of that. And I'll never forget being backstage, and everything's buzzing and people talking and keeping me occupied. So that was kind of quite cool. And I have an in-ear. It was, by the way, the Austrian version of Shark's Tank, something called 2 Minuten, 2 Millionen. And what was so interesting was, I've got people buzzing and talking to me and everything behind me is going wild. And that's cool for me. But then one thing happens. My in-ear device suddenly crackles and it goes 3 minutes. And suddenly there's silence. And that's the moment where I'm thinking to myself, oh boy. And that's when I noticed how my mouth suddenly got incredibly dry. Like that. And I'm like, okay, what have I done here? And it goes 2 minutes. And that moment I'm noticing how my hands are getting like super moist. I'm like, oh, this is going well. And then I looked to my right, and I'll never forget that. Next to me was my co-presenter. Who views German? Raise your hand. Ja, that worked well. Machen wir es anders. Wer ist aus Deutschland, sagt ja. I studied market research. That's 82%. That's awesome. Okay. Could be 83. I'd have to hear it again, but we don't have enough time for that. So anyhow, I look to my right, and there's Sonja Kraus. Who knows her? Say yes. I'd known her all my life from television, not personally, and suddenly I see her next to me like, what the that was just, it didn't make sense. She was next to me. And then it suddenly goes 90 seconds, and that's where I go like, oh. And suddenly I hear, that was my heart. And my heart was up here. And I thought my ears were moving together with my heart. And then the last crackle comes over the ear and goes, 60 seconds, stand by for countdown. And that's the moment where my stomach goes, I'm really not happy down here. I'm like, whoa. And that's the moment I saw the door. I call this the door moment, the door effect, where you think, well, what if I rip these cables off and run through the door and join the French Foreign Legion? It goes like 10 seconds, countdown, and I go like, French Foreign Legion, you'll have people shoot at you, but at the same time, you'll have to learn French. And we're like, yeah, I can do one of the two, but not both at the same time. And then suddenly the stage door opens, it's bright light, and I walk right into the light. It's a bit like dying, So I walk into the light, and interestingly, first of all, I didn't die, so here I am. And secondly, the show went really well. And it was crazy. I was driving home in a rental that day then, and I thought, I've just become a TV presenter, and I still have tremendous stage anxiety. What the hell is wrong with me? I'd always considered stage anxiety as this crazy weakness. And then, in that very moment, it occurred to me that bravery doesn't mean not being scared, but bravery means doing it although you are scared. And that moment changed the way I look on going on stage, the way I look about fear, the way I look about this whole thing completely. By the way, a fun fact, if you do have stage anxiety, I'll give you one pro tip. I met my wife 16 years ago. And the interesting thing is, I'd been on dates before, and you know how it is when you go on a date and you feel nothing, right? That's usually quite a good sign that that's not the right person. You know, you hold hands and you're like, yeah, that kind of sucks. And then you go like kissing, no, I'd rather kiss the ashtray over there. Yeah. And then suddenly I met her, and suddenly I had this incredible tingling sensation, and I knew she was the one. I hope you're okay. And for me, this sensation means she's the right one. And the same way, when I go on stage and I have this tingling sensation, it just tells me this is the right stage. This matters. This is important. So the next time you're standing behind a stage and you're like, oh, brother, what have I done? Embrace the moment, because plan A is you have a stage that matters. Plan B is you're kissing an ashtray. See? So this was storytelling. There's a polar opposite to storytelling, and this is called reporting. I used to have stage anxiety. I thought it was a weakness. I see it differently now. I mean, yeah. That's how it goes. Now, it's up to you to choose it, but I know there's a lot of you go like, yeah, here's storytelling. Isn't that just blah, blah? Well, not according to a study from Stanford. Because in 1969, they conducted a study, and what they did was they put a lot of facts and figures and had one group where they took the facts and figures and stuck them in a story. 93% of that group could actually recall that, the facts, the figures, and the story. And then they took a control group. They were just given the facts and figures. 13% could recollect them. So what I'm trying to tell you today is storytelling is not blah, blah. But in fact, the stories you tell matter deeply when it comes to making yourself heard. This guy, he once said, stories are more powerful than statistics. For those of you that live under a rock, this man is Simon Sinek. You're thinking, okay, this is cool, but it's kind of a modern thing, this storytelling. When I was educated back in university, stories are not important. I lectured at a bunch of universities nowadays. Fun fact is, it took me 20 semesters to get my degree. So if you have children and it's not going so well, it's going to get better potentially. And very important, by the way, the title, the pitch professor. I'm not a real professor. It's like a kind of fun title. I live in Austria, and Austrians, I love Austria. Really do. But Austrians really love titles. They're crazy about them. So if you do something long enough in Austria, you end up getting a title. So it's the pitch professor. And with that title, I also learned that there's regions in the German-speaking countries where people pronounce the P's and the B's the same. I'd never thought of that until I was given that title, until I was introduced and we said, he's called the pitch professor, and in the past 15 years, he's seen more than 10,000 pitches. So if you ever talk about pitching with a P, in German we say Plosivlaut. That one, very important. But this whole storytelling thing, by the way, isn't new. It goes back to the days when we meet at campfires. This is so fascinating. Back in the day, our ancestors would meet at campfires and we would use stories to convey information. We would say, look, over there at the river, there's like red berries, and our brother Hagar, he ate them, and he's still swimming upside down in the river. I think that's bad. Don't eat the red berries. And people go, okay, river over there, red berries, I understand. So, stories have always been a part of our evolution. We didn't evolve to remember information. we evolved to remember stories that kept us alive. And the beautiful thing is, if you hear a story that connects with you, that matters, your brain sets dopamine free. And dopamine is amazing. By the way, that was not my idea, but Dr. John Medina. So what I've established now in the last about 10 minutes is, quite simply, that storytelling is way better than factual reporting. That's not my opinion, those are facts. Now, if you're thinking, yes, Daniel, but I've kind of always done it with reporting, so I'd like to stick to reporting because that's the way I learned it and that's the way it worked for me. I would like to introduce you to this gentleman. And he has said, if you don't jump on the new, you don't survive. Now, I feel kind of embarrassed that I have to kind of add his name to it. That's Satya Nadella. You might want to look him up. He's amazing. I was like, yeah, I might have, you know, but just for continuity, I kept it there. Imagine one of you goes like, who's that? Bad moment. Now you're going, okay, I understand that. I like this storytelling thing, so what do I need for that? Well, you need a story. So you're going like, yeah, I need a story. How do I get a story? And the interesting thing is, a lot of people end here because they think they need some crazy story, like the day they became the first person to have pitched in free fall. That's me, by the way. I survived. It was amazing. But it's not about that. By the way, I learned 2 things that day, and one of them was that beard and free fall don't work. I convinced an Austrian company whose name I don't want to mention, who have 2 Formula 1 teams and have an energy drink, that I wanted to test my methods, how to overcome fear and still be able to perform on stage by jumping out of aeroplanes together with entrepreneurs. And we did that and we all survived, so that's cool. But the point being is, you don't need some crazy story for storytelling. There's one single thing you need. It has to be authentic. A story has to be real. A story has to be meaningful. Who of you has children? Say yes. 77%. Amazing. For the other ones, children are small humans, absolutely drop-dead gorgeous, but sometimes have the tendency to shout at you for no obvious reasons. And probably those of you who have children know that typical, you're running really late, and you hurry up and you rush them out of the door, and then you go to the elevator and press the button. And the day is ruined. Because you go, I wanted to press the button! It's totally happening to you up front there, but it's still about another year. That's an authentic story. It's a story you can relate to. The most important thing in storytelling is always be authentic. Be bold as well. Push it a bit. Be authentic, be bold, because if you're authentic and bold, what happens? People recognize you. People memorize you. Because if you're the one who wants to tell that one story without any edginess, without any boldness, without being authentic, they forget you. But if it's a good story, and the good stories are usually the most simplistic ones. You know that who of you travels a lot? Say yes. 64%. Good. Do you know that feeling when you're in a hotel room and you just cannot work out the shower? Do you know that? It's terrible. First you get burnt, then it's cold, and then you press. There's always like a second dial that makes no sense. It's just there to play with you. Same thing with the heater in hotels, right? It says warm, but it just gets louder. It says cold, but it just gets louder. Then you switch it off, but that doesn't work. Then you call the receptionist and say, no, we've just got one temperature. That's not an amazing story because it's like mad, but it's a relatable story. See? Now you're going, okay, good. I want this storytelling. How do I learn that? Here's how. It's quite simple. For a good story, you need your senses. Number 1, you can tell me, for example, what you see in a story. I said, remember, I was backstage, the door opened, and I looked into the shining light. I went into a boardroom, and the first thing I saw was the empty microphone at the end waiting for me to talk. The second is, what are you hearing? I was standing backstage and I heard a crackle on my ear that said, "Stand by." The third is smell. Smell is incredible for stories. I know you've all experienced that the way, for example, you go back in your old school and you just smell and you're instantly back. Smell is an incredible reminder to tell people what you experienced. Taste. Think about your last holiday, that moment when you went for the first swim and tasted the incredible saltiness of the sea on your lips. Taste. And lastly, touch. The way you walked to the beach and you could feel the sand between your toes. Do you have to do all of that, by the way, in that succession? No, of course not. By the way, all of what I say today, consider it a toolbox. You pick out the things that work for you. You challenge the ones you think are a bit and the ones you consider absolute BS, well, then don't do it. It's a toolbox. But the idea is to bring a story to life by that. And the most important thing, besides these 5 senses, is you want to add emotion to it. Because if you share how that moment made you feel, if you share the feelings going through you when you did this or did that, it makes you human. It makes you relatable. Here's a beautiful, beautiful quote. And it says, "I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." Think about those moments in your life that were important. Probably in many cases you won't know the exact words, but you will know those feelings. People will forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. It was said by Maya Angelou. And last but not least, what I also want to give you is, because I'm actually half Irish, half German, the Irish part loves the storytelling. But then again, I'm also half German, so I would like to give you a structure. Why are you laughing? My favorite TV presenter of all times, a guy by the name of Jeremy Clarkson. Say yes if you know him. Oh, that was a different yes than before. Yes, the man, the inventor of the greatest car show, 1, 2, 3, in the world. Anyhow, he interviewed a half Irish, half German actor. Can't think of his name right now. And he said to him, "So half Irish, half German, huh?" And he said, yeah. "Does that mean," Fassbender, that was his name, Michael Fassbender, "does that mean that you want to be brutally efficient tomorrow?" And that moment, he gave me identity. By the way, it gets more complicated. My wife is Colombian. I went to school in Portugal, and we live in Austria. Back to the structure. This is a very simple structure, how to tell a story. I like those colors, by the way, they're nice. So the first element of a good story is time. You need to earn time, and you do that by starting off with, let's say, a problem, for example, or an outline of a story your audience can relate to. So you talk about something you know they understand. You want to drive them in the first 10 or 20 seconds. You may never forget. It's absolutely essential, no matter who you are, no matter who your audience is, that you always go in with the feeling that you have to earn attention. You have to earn time. You can be the most brilliant person in the world, but you need to earn time. So you do that by talking about something that's relatable and ideally quantifying that as well. For example, you say, "Back in the day, everything was terrible, and the onboarding took an average of 6 months." By the way, totally random. But so we're going back in time and we quantify it with something. This is the first step. And then we add the second step. This is trust. You want to drop in your story why you can make this work. Why you are the ones that can not just make it work, but why your story matters. If you think back to my little story at the beginning, I said, I've always had stage anxiety. Imagine I'd say, I always had stage anxiety, and it's the first time I'm on stage today. You'd go like, well, of course you've got stage anxiety, sunshine. But I told you I had stage anxiety when I became a professional TV presenter. I still have, by the way, stage anxiety up to today. It's important to me, and I've been on stage more than 500 times. I have it every single time. But by saying this, you trust me, because you go like, hey, if you have stage anxiety, A, you probably know what you're talking about, and B, if you have it, it's okay for me to have it as well. By the way, there's someone else who's very good at building trust in a very subtle way. If you go to the doctor the next time, look at the walls. Can anyone, do you know what you see on the walls? Just someone want to shout? I heard certificates. That's right. Why do doctors put certificates on the wall? Because they're trying to build trust. They're saying, look, I'm really smart, trust me. No one ever reads them. It might say number 9 drinking competition in Yale. And you go like, so next time when you're at the doctors, look at the diplomas and think of today. Don't laugh, it's a true story. And then you end that story by talking about belief, or even better, how your belief changed. If you think about my story, I ended with saying, and on that day, the way I looked at stage anxiety, the way I looked at bravery, changed forever. That's how you round off a good story. So just so you say, back in the day, everything was terrible. Onboarding took 6 months. Until we decided we have to change this. And it was hard and it was difficult. I'm quite scared taking that step. Until we met our trusted partner. He said, you know what? It's going to be very tough, but we're going to do everything to make this work. We had some of the biggest clients in the world, but we'll assure you, we will give it you your absolute utmost. And that's what they did. And from then on, I believed that taking the step early is much better than waiting it out. By the way, the story was just a random story of how a structure can look. But you get the idea. You earn time, you build trust, and you transform belief. And the last element of a really good story is you need to anchor it. And you will have seen that I've done this several times before in this talk. The anchor is where you tell people when to think of that story again. You tell them the next time you do blah, think of my story. And the anchor I want to put in your head is the next time you're working on a presentation, a customer presentation, no matter what it is, and this really matters to you, and you really, really, really want to show them why you're the ones who can make it work. Be brave enough to not just be facts and figures and numbers, but be brave enough to put it in a story. Because if you put it in a story, 93% remember it. If it's just facts and figures, it's only 13. So the next time, back home, think about 93 is better than 13. In other words, stories make all the difference. Pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for this. And I'm very curious to hearing some of your stories later. Thank you.